Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the evidentiary hearing in case number 9507S, the continuing investigation of the electric fuel rate and purchase power cost adjustment charges of Williamsport Municipal Electric Light Plant. I take appearances starting with counsel for Williamsport.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tom Rudabush here from the firm of Duncan Weinberg, Genzer, Pembroke, appearing on behalf of the town of Williamsport.
And Maryland Office of People's Counsel.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Jonah Baskin from Maryland Office of People's Counsel.
And commission staff.
Good morning, Your Honor. Ruthie Herman, Herman, appearing on behalf of staff.
Looks like we did get it advertised, Mr. Rudabush.
Yes, Your Honor. If I may, I'd like to have marked for identification as W1, Exhibit W1, mail log number 318070, which is the affidavit of publication in the newspaper, as well as screenshots of the town's website and Facebook page as you directed in your order, Your Honor. And if there's no objection, I'd like to move Exhibit W1 into evidence.
Any objections?
No objection.
No objections. Thank you.
Okay. W1 will be admitted. Okay. Did you filed or sent something around last evening?
I did, Your Honor.
What was your intent with that?
Was to put our witness on the stand, Your Honor, and have him update his exhibits.
I don't know that that provides sufficient time for the other parties. OPC?
We have not had time to look over the calculations. However, from a cursory glance, assuming that the numbers are right, and when we look through and that they track with the documentation, they don't significantly change any of our thoughts regarding the disposition of the case.
So you're not opposed to updating the numbers here today?
We would want additional time to be able to review them, but we're not opposed to moving forward with discussing the updated numbers here today.
Thank you, Your Honor. Staff does oppose using that material. Staff's witness has not had a chance to properly review the numbers in the documents. Thank you.
I think that we're going to move ahead today with the original filing because I don't think that provided anyone enough time to review the numbers. If we hadn't had the snafu with advertising, you wouldn't have updated the numbers. You were only able to update the numbers because you didn't advertise properly. We were here a week ago. Well, not here, but we tried to have a hearing a week ago, right? And you hadn't updated the numbers, so we would have had a hearing on what was filed, correct?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Okay, so the only reason that you were able to update was because you weren't able to advertise. And you sent it around at 4:30 last evening. I haven't looked at it. I had a hearing last evening.
Well, I'm aware of the time, Your Honor, and I apologize for the short notice. Given the extra week, we did have the opportunity to update or replace, I should say, the forecasted numbers for February and March of 2025 with the actual numbers, and that because of that change, certain other numbers changed just because of the way the mathematics work. But all we did was update a couple of the numbers to reflect actual numbers instead of forecast numbers.
Right, but staff would like the time to review that for accuracy. They can't testify today about the accuracy of those calculations.
I understand that, Your Honor.
Are you okay with we're going to proceed with the original filing? Or do you not want to proceed at all today?
Well, I think, Your Honor, the choice as I see it is to proceed with the original numbers, which may would result in our having to not be able to make it for another year. We would probably have to come in for a new re-levelization before our normal one-year time frame.
Yeah, that was going to be my expectation anyway, though, given the situation. It was going to be my suggestion that we come in 6 months again to see what has happened with the PGM auction.
Right. Well, there's lots of things in
Lots of
play.
things are
I
moving,
totally understand
right.
that, Your Honor.
So I was thinking that we should come in 6 months anyway. We can come in sooner. The only thing the statute requires is that you come in at least once a year.
Right.
So we can come in.
Oh, I understand
We can come
that.
in every month if we need to.
If we're outside of the 3% bandwidth, anytime that happens, Your Honor, yes.
So if your numbers had gone down, I might press staff on the issue, but your number went up, right?
It did go up slightly,
Yeah.
Your Honor.
So I think that we're going to proceed with what you'd filed, and then we're going to discuss a date for when we're going to come back. Okay. So,
Okay, Your Honor, thank you.
Mr. Sims, you're the witness.
Your Honor, we call Christopher Sims to the stand.
Good morning. Please
Morning.
raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under the penalty of perjury to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the testimony that you're about to give?
I do.
And could you please state and spell your first and last name for the record?
Christopher Sims, ChristopherSimms.
And could you provide your business address?
P.O. Box 4151, Ocean City, Maryland 21843.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Sims. Do you have your original
Yes, I do.
direct testimony in front of you? Okay. So just so the record is clear, the current PCA is 0.04364, correct?
That's correct.
And Williamsport is proposing an increase to 0.07757, correct?
That's correct.
And that's an increase of 0.03393, correct?
That's correct.
When did you learn that the results of the base residual auction would mean that capacity costs would increase by 900%?
That auction occurred, I believe the date would be at the very end of July of last year. So the results would have been published probably that first week of August of 2024.
And that's when you knew that the capacity prices were going to increase?
That's correct. And the reason I didn't come in for a PPA filing at that time was because the energy prices were still so low leading up to the end of 2024 that the increase in capacity cost could have been absorbed in that previous PPA had the energy costs stayed at where they were through the end of December 2024. Because you can see in the exhibits, it was in the low $30 per megawatt hour for the energy portion. And so when January occurred, we had those very two cold weeks in January. And so the energy cost in January for just the LMPs was over $72 a megawatt hour. And so had that month have occurred just the way December did, we would have been able to absorb that 3% bandwidth. And so it wasn't until effectively after January was over and we saw the PJM bills that we knew that we would be outside of the 3% bandwidth. So that's when I started preparing the exhibits to make the filing that I did on March 6th of this year to relevelize the PPA or PCA.
Okay. Does OPC have any questions for Mr. Sims?
We do, Your Honor. I would like to ask Mr. Sims about OPC's data request 1. May I approach the bench to provide a copy?
Okay. I haven't seen it, so yeah. Actually, I think you did. Did you email it? Did you want this marked as an exhibit?
Yes, Your Honor. Can you mark that as exhibit, OPC Exhibit 1?
So marked.
Mr. Sims, do you have before you OPC Data Request 1?
Yes, I do.
And was this document prepared by you or under your supervision and direction?
Yes, it was.
Do you have any corrections or deletions to make to your data request responses at this
No,
time?
I do not.
Okay, and if you were asked the same questions today under oath, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd like to have OPC Exhibit 1 admitted into the record.
Any objections?
No objections. Thank you.
No, Your Honor.
OPC Exhibit 1 is admitted into the record.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Sims, could you please turn to question 1-2C? You stated in your answer that Williamsport is making its PCA filing 3 months early, quote, so it has the cash on hand to pay its bills. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
In question 1-2B, you stated that the utility has $2.5 million in cash and cash equivalents, and that there's potentially additional cash that the utility can access from the water and sewer utilities and from the town general fund. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in question 1-2C, you also stated that the utility has a further $2 million in credit. Is that correct?
That's right.
Can you explain why, given the access to cash, Williamsport would not have the cash on hand to pay its bills if it did not file the PCA 3 months early?
I guess it was a poor choice of words to utilize cash on hand specifically to pay the bills. I mean, really, this comes down to they were outside of the 3% bandwidth from the forecasted PCA revenues relative to actual power supply costs. So that's what triggered the need to do the PCA relevelization. And so in order to accurately charge the customers for their actual incursion of capacity cost, we need this PCA effectively to go into place starting June 1st. Otherwise, there's going to be a mismatch between when the customers are incurring those PJM charges at the higher capacity rate and when the town is charging those customers to recoup those costs.
So I understand your comment with regards to wanting to make sure that you're within that 3% bandwidth, but was there any basis for you saying that Williamsport would not have the cash on hand to pay its bills if it did not file the PCA 3 months early?
It does not say, I did not state that if they did not have that cash on hand from the PCA specifically, that they would not be able to cover their bills. So I know that they would be able to cover their bills. It's just, this is to more accurately capture the revenues from customers as they are being billed, is probably a better way to have worded it.
Okay, thank you. If we can turn to your answer for question 1-3. You stated that with regards to the RFPs Williamsport issued for energy previously, that there's no reason to assume that a new vendor would provide an indicative price materially more competitive than those being received from the current shortlisted vendors. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Recognizing that the bid in any individual RFP might be confidential, generally speaking, what was the magnitude and difference between the high and low bids that you received in the previous RFP that Williamsport ran?
off the top of my head, I don't recall, but there is typically a wide range, but then there are suppliers that respond that effectively be like the two shortlisted suppliers are basically Walmart and Amazon, and the other ones, sure, they could maybe offer something, but it's not lower than Amazon and Walmart, and it can be materially higher.
And can you clarify, in the last RFP were Williamsport, or sorry, were Energy Harbor and I don't remember what the
AEP.
and AEP, the two lowest bidders?
Mm-hmm. That they were, yes.
Okay. In the last RFP, can you clarify the specific product or products which Williamsport asked for bids for?
Yeah, there was a load following product that would follow Williamsport's load 100%. There was a fixed load shape product that it was effectively buying blocks, set amount of blocks of power on peak and off peak and weekend for each month. So it was a set amount. So depending on the day and the hour of the day, there would be a fixed amount. So it doesn't follow Williamsport's load. So those were the two products that they requested.
So did Williamsport request a bid for a quote that would include capacity as part of the product purchased?
No, it did not. The only other thing asked for in there was the renewable portfolio standard cost, and all of the responses back from the suppliers, with the exception of maybe one, was that they cannot provide a competitively bid product that was below the alternative compliance payment, and so most of them didn't even offer an ACP or a renewable portfolio standard rate. They only offered us energy prices.
I'm a bit confused. Can you confirm that previously Williamsport had gotten a bid from Energy Harbor for a contract that was $0.06163 per kilowatt hour, which included capacity costs?
So that was outside of the RFP. That was because there was the possibility to extend their previous contract with Energy Harbor, but then Energy Harbor got bought out by Vistra, so there's no guarantee that that even would have been possible at that time. But yeah, maybe 2 years ago, they could have extended it maybe at that rate, but it's hard to say.
Okay.
Sorry.
In your response to question 1-3B, you stated that. Oh, thank you. You stated that it would be a waste of resources to issue a new RFP. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
What resources would it take to issue an RFP, and could you estimate a cost and time that would be required?
I don't know specifically offhand, because the last RFP that was issued was done by Hagerstown, and they had Thermont and Williamsport in there with them. So Hagerstown had paid an outside consultant to do those services, but I can imagine it's at minimum $20,000 plus.
Thank you. Can you refer to your answer to question 1-8? Can you confirm that in response to 1-8A, you stated that Williamsport did not solicit bids for products other than energy products?
That's correct.
And that's because, as you said, typically PJM members don't lock in prices for non-energy terms.
That's correct.
And you previously stated that Williamsport's previous contract with Energy Harbor, which was then Vistra, included capacity. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Can you explain why Williamsport was previously able to get long-term contracts with capacity? despite
That's
it
right.
being
That
unusual?
contract originated in 2008, and so PJM was basically brand new. And in fact, RPM, those rules, the base residual auctions, did not exist before 2008. That's when the LMP was broken out into three pieces, and the capacity auctions started to exist. And so we didn't have any history of the clearing of those capacity auctions, and so Energy Harbor, or well, at that time it was Allegheny Energy Supply, they likely had still some ties to that historic generation that was in the APS zone that the town was able to access prior to coming in the PJM and the deregulation that came along with it. And so once that relationship eventually, got separated over time and we have more history of the capacity auction, the perfect example is that on the transmission side, the previous contract actually included transmission. And then in about 2016, I'd have to look back and see exactly what year it was, we actually removed the transmission from that next extension that we did. Like I said, I had to look and see exactly which year it was, but we removed the transmission because that is handled through effectively the FERC filing with the transmission owner, and so that's basically a pass-through number that we don't have any control over, not even PJM has any control over. And so it's effectively the same kind of thing with the capacity side. It's that since all the generators are now participating in that capacity market, it's not available for the suppliers to really competitively bid against what the clearing prices are in the RPM auction. And so that's why the capacity is not offered, and that's really why the RPS isn't offered. It's because the suppliers don't have access to more generators than PJM does. So that's effectively why, even as Kevin Mosher has stated, that it is typically cheaper to buy it directly from the PJM markets because it is so competitively bid. It has a large swath of generators in the 13-state area that it exists in.
But in PJM, is it correct that you can have bilateral sales for capacity?
You absolutely can. And in fact, one of my other clients in the APS zone does have that. And they were paid about $100 a megawatt day before the clearing of this last auction. And so they had effectively been overpaying because the capacity prices had been in the 20s and 30s. So yes, it will save in that one particular year, but typically a lot of suppliers wouldn't go beyond where the RPM auctions have cleared. I mean, they certainly can. It is possible, but you're picking from a very small group of generators that choose not to participate in the PJM capacity auctions.
And so can you just confirm that, did Williamsport ever seek an RFP for non-energy long-term contracts?
I mean, not since the last agreement.
Thank you. When Energy Harbor went from providing its energy and capacity contract to just getting the RFP bid with just energy, was there communication with Energy Harbor about if Energy Harbor would continue to offer an energy plus capacity contract?
So at that time, I did try to get from them to break out what the individual components were in that bid price, but they wouldn't provide that because they. So I don't know how much of it was for energy, how much of it was for capacity. So I can't really say with any certainty at what level that capacity would have been offered at. But like I said, I do have other clients that had locked in some capacity, but they were paying 3 to 4 times what the market rate actually was during that time period.
Yeah, I guess my question is, Mr. Sims, when you had said that at one point you would be able to, it seemed like you might have been able to continue that old contract, which had capacity plus energy. What was the communication like about how long that would continue to be offered, and when was it no longer offered to Williamsport?
I'm not sure I recall the exact specifics. Like I said, there was a lot of turmoil in Energy Harbor specifically as they were getting bought out by Vistra, so it's very difficult to say as the new new owner was coming in. I mean, in fact, I mean, Dave Holder was the person, our main contact there. He was with Allegheny Energy Supply even before 2008 when that first agreement was there, and when Vistra came in, they booted him out, and so it's hard to say what if Vistra would have even honored that contract, extended it further.
Do you have Mr. Sims' supplemental direct testimony in 9507R?
I didn't have it in front of me, but that was why I was a little bit confused, Your Honor. I
Do
believe.
you want to take the time to
Let me
print it
pull that
out?
up, if that's okay.
It has some dates in there.
I mean, that testimony would have been before the
Stop.
BRA.
There's a no question right now.
In your supplemental direct testimony in 9507R, on pages 2, lines 2 through the end of the paragraph at line 8, you stated that Williamsport received an RFP for service to begin on June 1st, 2024, which would have resulted in an increase in the full requirements contract price to $0.06163 per kilowatt hour. Is that correct? I can
I'm
show you
assuming
the
so.
test.
I'm assuming so. Yes.
I don't want you to assume. Do you have
No,
that
no,
testimony?
That's fine.
you.
Yes, that's correct.
All right.
That's okay.
Right.
Yes,
Anyway,
that's correct.
We're gonna take a 5-minute break. We're gonna print out the testimony. We're gonna get it in front of the witness. Okay. We're gonna take a 5-minute break. I'm gonna print out the testimony. We're gonna get it in front of the witness so that we're not assuming guessing. Okay. We're in recess.
She's going to print it out. Yeah. We stay here. Right. She's not asking us to print it out. She's printing it out from the docket. Yeah. She knows we could do it, but it's chain of custody, right? Chain of custody.
I mean, the problem is that it says full requirements, and yes, it does from the standpoint of that they paid the entire PJM bill, but then they passed through transmission, the other sporting facilities charge, that they passed through a lot of things. And it was load following is more like what it was.
Excuse me, Tom and Jonah.
If not, I can call. It's like I said, it is completely unrelated to this case.
Thank you. I forgot that we were outside having a piece of dinner. I wasn't sitting there on the stands. Okay, that was all that. Thanks. Thanks. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Back on the record, please.
Back on the record.
Thank you.
Mr. Sims, my questions are going to be about your answer to question 5, which is between pages 1 and 2. As I was asking, on page 2 at line 2 through the end of the paragraph at line 8, you stated that Williamsport had an offer for a full requirements contract at a price of $0.06163 per kilowatt hour. Can you confirm if that would have included energy, capacity, and a pass-through of certain other PJM costs?
Yes, that would have been the energy, capacity, and basically the ancillary services. What would be outside of that, what is passed through, would have been the transmission, the other supporting facilities charge, the transmission enhancement charge, and the what else? I think there's one other thing. I'm not sure, but yeah, there were certain items, largely the transmission being what's passed through, but the ancillary services like the auction revenue rights were left with the supplier.
And you can confirm that that was for the RFP for service to begin on June 1, 2024?
So, no, what's actually calculated there? Okay, so I see what's happening. That sentence reads, the indicative pricing received from the RFP for service to begin on June 1st would have resulted in an increase in the full requirements contract price to $61.31. So we did not actually receive a bid for $61.31 or an indicative offer at $61.31. I was calculating the equivalent, meaning taking the energy price from what we received from the suppliers from the RFP and adding to that the capacity and the ancillary services so that it could be compared to what an equivalent would be if it were offered to us from an extension of that contract.
So your RFP wouldn't have been for a full requirements contract?
That's correct, it was not.
So can you explain why it says, why your testimony stated that the indicative pricing received from the RFP for service to begin on June 1st, 2024 would have resulted in an increase in the full requirements contract price to the $0.06163 per kilowatt hour price?
Again, that term full requirements applied when that initial contract was agreed upon in 2008 because it was a full requirements contract in 2008. As it got amended over the years and things were removed and then passed through, it no longer technically became a full requirements contract, but technically those words still exist in that contract in the very beginning, even though it's kind of morphed into something that is not actually full requirements, even at its end. So,
and in the RFP, the bid was for something called a full requirements contract?
No, it was load following, either 100% load following the energy, meaning they would provide us a price, and regardless of what the energy needs were for the town at any given hour, the supplier would supply that amount of energy at a fixed price. So it was load following, 100% load following, not full requirements. And the other thing were blocks.
So at any time did Williamsport receive a RFP bid for a full requirements contract?
No.
What was the bid that Williamsport received for its June 1, for service beginning June 1, 2024 that occurred as part of that RFP?
Right. There was the 100% load following, energy only. There were blocks, energy only, fixed blocks, depending on weekend, on peak, off peak, and the RPS requirement.
And at what price?
I mean, they provided that matrix that had the prices on there. I'm sure it was provided in the last, I'm positive it was provided in response to either a data request in previous years, But that's where they gave us a range of prices depending on who the supplier was.
Could you refer to your answer to 1-7A.
And is this still in the last year's?
No, this is in this year's OPC data request one. Sorry. Could you describe what the cost listed in column E represents?
That is the LMP cost. I mean, that is the energy cost only. So it's the system-based energy price plus the marginal cost component price plus the marginal loss component price of the LMP.
Column E refers to a 2023 RFP prospective energy contract cost.
Oh, you mean that exact, sorry.
Yeah.
That exact rate, the 5405, is exactly what Hagerstown locked in as a result of that RFP. And so since the responses to the RFP for these three utilities is generally the same, that is what I was using as the basis for if they had followed along and followed through with locking in the RFP along with Hagerstown, then they would have been under contract under 5405.
But was the Hagerstown RFP contract the same as the Williamsport contract?
Yes, they offered the same two products, and they actually offered an additional product as well. I'm not sure what that product was, but I know it was for energy only, whether it was, I think it was actually fixed blocks, like around-the-clock blocks, not load-following blocks. So, but yeah, they all three got responses back for the energy price only.
Is the Hagerstown load profile the same as the Williamsport?
That's what I'm
load
saying.
profile?
It's so close that the difference in cost is generally pennies. Like if you looked at all the amendments in previous years, because we all extended our contracts at the same time, they're going to be within pennies of each other.
Has Williamsport done any calculation regarding using the actual RFP price it was quoted, the cost differential between its strategy of buying all of its energy on the day ahead and balancing markets versus having had it locked into the RFP?
So that's why I utilized the price that Hagerstown did, because that is, it would have been within a couple cents of that figure is what Williamsport would have been able to lock in. And so the thing is, you can move that goal stick, that comparison stick, to any date and time from when we received indicative pricing going all the way up until May 31st of 2024 when the contract expired. And so that's just the place that I picked is that is a reasonable assumption is that Williamsport would have been close to that price. It's when you're talking about avoided opportunity costs, it's difficult to calculate exactly what that is. I mean, I could go and see. I mean, we received a lot of indicative pricing, and so yes, it's within that range. Some may have been in the $50 or $51, and some may be $57 or $58. I just chose that because that is a reasonable assumption is that they would have been within a couple pennies of Hagerstown because that's how it has been since 2008. Every time they extended their agreement, it was at basically the same price. So as a result of going to the market, we've only paid $45.17 up through the end of February for per megawatt hour for the energy. So that was the $740,000, and we would have paid $885,000 under the contract. And so we've effectively saved almost $150,000 by buying it at the market.
Can you explain the basis for that statement? Again, is it correct that the basis for that statement is estimating off of Hagerstown's numbers and not Williamsport's numbers?
That's correct, but it would be only pennies different in terms of the dollar per megawatt hour.
Okay. Please refer to your answer in question 1-6. And specifically 1-6D. Is it correct that in response to question 1-6D, you stated that Williamsport's $45 per megawatt hour target is a year-long price objective?
That's correct.
And can you explain what that means?
That means that the load-weighted average LMP price that we were expecting to pay, like we would enter into a contract if they could fix all of our energy purchases at $45 a megawatt hour or less.
So if 1 month the price was significantly, on the real-time market was significantly lower than $45 per megawatt hour, would that impact the rate at which you would enter into a contract for the next month?
So you're right, and I'm sure I know I said it in here somewhere else, but that $45 is the load-weighted average for the whole year, so a 12-month view.
So can you explain how in any given month you calculated what the price target for a month-long contract, for example, would be?
So, I mean, we have those futures in terms of what the on-peak, off-peak, and monthly price will be that shows a deviation from the mean on a monthly basis of whether it's a shoulder month or a peak month. So we could have done that, but we never, even when we were looking for just June by itself, it never got below $45. So that's why we never ended up extending it. So we didn't even come into that scenario where that would have come into play.
So, for example, in this past January, do you have an estimate of what your price target was for a contract for just January?
So that's the thing. It's the suppliers preferred not to do a monthly contract, and so they were willing to do that to sort of keep us as customers to extend that contract. So the going out and purchasing it monthly from suppliers is effectively a moot point at this point. So we're really only receiving prices that either go to the end of 25 or go to the end of 26.
When you conducted your RFP, was it just for year-long bids?
That's correct. Even though it had different monthly prices.
And has Williamsport ever conducted an RFP to see if it could find a supplier for monthly bids?
No, I mean that's why we did not. We asked the two shortlisted suppliers if they would be willing to do a 1 month price as we approached the end of the contract, as a way to hopefully have continued that relationship, but unfortunately it wasn't able to come to pass.
And have you asked since 2024, when the contract ended, if they'd be willing to enter into month-long contracts with you?
I did not ask again, no.
Please refer to your answer in question 1-5C. Is it correct that you stated that the indicative pricing that Williamsport receives is for energy-only products of varying length?
That's correct.
And can you explain what those varying lengths were?
I don't have the term sheet in front of me, but I believe it was 1, 2, and 3 year terms.
Given the previous contract had energy plus capacity as part of the contract. Can you explain how the town decided to set a price target solely for energy as opposed to energy plus capacity?
Well, I mean, like I said, the other clients that I have that did purchase capacity prior to the last BRA, they were paying $100 a megawatt day, and the BRA had not cleared above that since, I think, 2016. So there was no reason to ask for them to lock in capacity because I would assume they would have had that same premium.
Has Williamsport ever changed its target price?
No, it has not.
Could you refer to your answer to question 1-6A? And can you confirm that it is still the case that Williamsport will enter into a long-term contract if and only if it receives an indicative price of less than $45 per megawatt hour?
That's correct at this time.
So if Williamsport got an offer for a yearly energy contract with an average cost of $46 per megawatt hour, it would not take it?
I mean, I would definitely have conversations with them. I mean, that was effectively what happened at the end of the contract, is that it got down to about $48 a megawatt hour, the indicative pricing that we were receiving from the suppliers. And so that's why it was close, and I thought there was hope that we could effectively bridge that gap. So it's not a hard line. That hard line is the mayor is pre-authorized to accept a contract that's at or below $45. So $46 would require action from the mayor and council to lock into that agreement. And we probably would consider, I mean, I'm sure we have no doubt we would consider it. I mean, the numbers are still in the high 50s, so we're nowhere near that.
Could you look at your answer to 1-6C? Or, sorry, excuse me. 1-6B. Is it correct that you said since actual market prices have remained below $45 per megawatt hour, there's been no compelling reason to reconsider target prices?
That's correct.
But can you also confirm that the projected average cost for this upcoming year is above $45 per megawatt hour?
I mean, barely, but yes.
How long does Williamsport have to lock in a contract price once it has received an indicative pricing bid?
I mean, they would have to get an agreement between them and the supplier. And like I said, all the indicative pricing is only good for one day. And you can imagine in this administration, one day can make a big difference in terms of what that price is. So it's hard to say exactly how quickly a new contract can be written up and entered into if we got a price today that was $45. I mean, typically we would see some indication that prices are at least getting close to the indicative price, and that would get the wheels rolling so that we can get an agreement in place, but there's just been no reason to do so at this point.
So if for some reason prices were to drop to $46 per megawatt hour, would not having the authorization associated with the target price being at $45 an hour play a risk of not being able to take advantage of that quote?
No, the mayor can get approval from the council faster than an agreement can be put together in place with a supplier.
So then can you explain the value of the price target and the role it plays?
The role it plays is, so at that time, when we were still under contract, we would have been able to work out getting an agreement in place in time before it would have actually started. And so, yes, it was more beneficial up through the end of the contract. Now it's basically being more used as when is the market going to get close to where the suppliers are going to get close to where the actual LMP market prices are before we would likely then issue another RFP and start but there's no reason to start the process now unless there's a material decrease in the energy price, and there's just no sign that that's coming.
When was the last time you talked with the Williamsport Town Council about their price target?
I mean, it probably a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I mean, the mayor asked specifically how, that it was set at $45. Is that reasonable to keep it at the $45? And I said, well, our energy costs over the past year or 11 months or whatever it's been since June 1st of 24, have been right around 45 and some change. So I don't see a reason that we should bump it up. I mean, the energy prices are close to that target price.
Let's move on to your response to question 1-5. You stated that the energy suppliers are aware of Williamsport's price target of $45 per megawatt hour. Can you explain what about that price target has been communicated with the shortlisted suppliers?
Well, I mean, we told them directly, if you see the market prices get close to $45, we have authorization to execute at $45. So that, I mean, they're a public entity. Anybody can go to the public hearings and meetings and hear me talk about these exact same things. And when they set the $45 target, so it's no mystery behind it. That's what it was.
You stated in your answer that they know that if the price target gets close to $45, that they should approach you. Is that precisely what was communicated, or is there a communication about $45 being a hard cutoff?
No, I mean, it's they want to make a deal more badly than anybody, and so they have every incentive, and they know. Yeah, I mean, like I said, Dave Holder had been in the business for 40 years, so he knows if he thinks he can get close to that number, he's going to come to me with that number so that we can lock something in. And yeah, if it's the $45 was just, that's basically the slam dunk where that's the no-brainer. It went below 45. We're more than happy to lock it in at that. But if it's close, that's where we would need additional consideration.
Given the quotes you receive are not written, is there any other way you memorialize the conversation you have about getting what quote you receive any given month?
No, I mean, like I said, it's they know what the price is that day, and they just tell me what the price is, and it like I said, we're just so far away from where the actual market is. I didn't write it down.
You stated earlier that given the current climate, that prices could change dramatically day to day. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What's the basis for getting quotes monthly?
You mean
You
receiving
an indicative price every month? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, the benefit to that is because, like I said, things change very quickly. Like the natural gas price, for instance, it went from about $4.70 in February, and it's down to $3.20 today. It can move very quickly. It can move 10-15% in one day based on what they believe the future demand is going to be in the supply. So it can change very quickly to the good and to the worst. And so just keeping that constant contact is good to make sure. I mean, typically the best times to buy are in the spring and the fall. People are less worried about weather. So yeah, the likelihood of locking something in July and January is very small, but it's still good to keep that communication open because you never know.
And do the indicative price bids track with the natural gas costs?
They have not, just because the natural gas cost is sort of a daily historical view, and the indicative pricing obviously is for the next 12 months. So they have a lot more stable future price on energy, just because they eliminate a lot of the noise of the daily changes in there.
So how much does the indicative price cost change?
I mean,
Day to day, if you had to
at most, maybe 10% would be a very big one. A lot of the times it's 2%, maybe 50 cents to $1
Great.
per megawatt hour.
Is Williamsport aware of the indicative prices you receive any given month?
Yeah, I mean, not the exact price, but I do provide them a monthly report as required in the ordinance about that tracks that 3% collection of the PPA. And I do mention in those communications, if there has been any material change, I may not express every single one, but if it's worth pointing out, then I certainly would.
And is commission staff ever made aware of the bids you received?
Not the indicative prices. I mean, beyond what was provided, obviously up through the end of the contract. I mean, we were as open as we possibly could be then, and it's just since then, the energy prices since July, effectively of last year, have gone up and just stayed up. The supplier's price has gone up and stayed up. The energy price itself in the market has stayed relatively stable.
Can we move to your response to question 1-6? And specifically 1-6C. Is it correct that in 1-6C you said that Williamsport is less inclined now more than ever to return to paying a third-party supplier for a fixed contracted price at any premium to the current market level?
That's correct.
Can you explain why the third-party energy market includes a premium compared to the market rate?
I mean, they're not going to do it for free, and so they have to add in their costs to actually schedule the load against ours and do whatever hedges they need, and the hedges are being bought from the same market at that time, and so they inevitably include a premium on whatever the current market price is.
Thank you. So could you explain, just in a nutshell, the concept of a risk premium?
I mean, I can't speak for how the supplier actually hedges their energy purchases. If they don't hedge their energy purchases at all, then they are they're just trying to forecast to the best of their ability what the future cost is going to be of that energy, and they need to include a return for their investors. And so they have to add that return on top of whatever they believe their costs are going to be going forward, whether they're buying it from PJM or if they're hedging it in some other fashion.
And about what return is typical?
So, like I said, prior to 2022, we had been seeing roughly a $5 per megawatt hour difference between the market price and what the suppliers were, the indicative price, what the suppliers were willing to offer. And after 2022, when the energy prices were, $70 plus, then those people that had the fixed contracts, like we did save money in 2022, but we probably overpaid in every year before that. So it's a I don't know exactly how much return. I mean, they're seemingly including a $10 and a $15 increase today after 2022 because likely it probably hurt a lot of suppliers who didn't hedge against that eventuality.
How does Williamsport consider what an appropriate risk premium that it would be willing to pay is worth?
I mean, a lot of it is based off of my recommendation to them, just because I've been doing it for 20 years, and so it's. I think we just got used to having so many years, 15 years of only a $5 per megawatt hour premium, that it doesn't seem right to suddenly pay almost a 50% premium. Effectively, that's what it is. $15 is a 50% premium to where the energy prices were back then. So I just couldn't justify it.
So if the expected cost for this year's, could you clarify for us again the expected cost for this upcoming year's average energy cost?
Yeah, I mean it's based on.
It's like $46, right? Something along those lines.
Yeah, from the revised one, but from the initial filing, it would have been $45.87.
Okay, so
just for the energy.
A $45 price plus a $5 risk premium would be $50. Is that correct per megawatt hour?
That's true.
Why is Williamsport interested in energy that would include a $5 risk premium?
I mean, we would likely start to have conversations if it was at or below $50 a megawatt hour. That's probably when I would start telling the town, hey, we're starting to see movement into the 40s. I think just visually seeing it in the 40s, even if it's 49.50, maybe that's something that they would want to go towards. I don't know.
And can you explain why the risk premium would stay the same at $5 even if the base cost that it is covering changes in terms of the base cost of the energy costs?
So the suppliers are going to try and maximize the price that they get. And so they have been able to find enough other utilities, lock in contracts at $55. Why sell something for $50 when you can get $55? And so if they apparently they don't need our business bad enough to be more competitive. It takes some supplier out there to saying, okay, I don't need $15 a megawatt hour premium. I only need $5 a megawatt hour premium. And that's, if that person's out there, I would love that person to come forward.
I guess my question was more about Williamsport's valuation of what is an appropriate risk premium. One would oftentimes insurance on items scales with the base item's price. Can you explain why Williamsport has a consistent valuation of $5 as the appropriate amount per megawatt hour to pay as the appropriate risk premium?
So the insurance isn't a good analogy from the standpoint of the town. The only benefit that a supplier does is to provide a fixed price. And so the town, being that it's able to adjust its PCA to follow their change in cost, there's not a lot of benefit to paying anybody to fix that particular energy price. It's really a remnant of prior to PJM. When everybody entered in long-term contracts with the transmission owner because you had to. That was the only person you're connected to. But now that we've gotten this whole big market opened up to us, that is extremely competitively bid on a minute by minute basis. We're members from PJM. We have access to all those generators. Why pay somebody else to pay those generators when we can just cut out the middle person and do it ourselves? Like, we're not losing the risk of losing an asset. So that's why insurance doesn't. It's just not an equivalent analogy, because there's nothing to be lost here. Like, we have access to the power that we can buy from PJM at any quantity that we want.
Does Williamsport see any value to hedging against changes, for example, in the gas market that might shift energy costs over a longer period?
You look at the last 20-year history, there was really only 2 times that the energy price really spiked up, like it did in 22 following the pandemic, and in 2008. And so you're talking about events that happen once every 10 years as far as we know. And so since we just have one in 22, maybe we don't have one till 2030, and that could be enough time to where suppliers have to get more aggressive to get people to lock into longer term contracts. And so they have to get closer to the market. Otherwise, it's hard to speculate, but that.
Mr. Sim, could you please look at the data in the table that you provided as attachment 1? It's on the back of the last page of the packet. Is energy in the day ahead or the real-time load balancing market typically more expensive?
So it varies month by month. I mean, in January, it was way more expensive in the day ahead than it was in the real time, almost $20 a megawatt hour difference, which is why I didn't buy any. I look at it on a weekly basis. It's very hard to tell from PJM which one's going to be higher. So I just try to do as best I can, looking at the load forecast. They provide a 7-day load forecast, and that's typically, recent history of that load forecast should give you a good idea of how good PJM is estimating the day aheads. And so it really depends on the month. Well, not even the month. Depends on the day. They could be very right one day and very wrong the next, and it could go either way.
So the difference in price between the real time and day ahead is primarily due to how well PJM forecasted the load?
Oh, it's 100% that, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is there a general industry standard for utilities associated with how much energy they purchase in the real time versus how much they purchase in the day ahead market?
I don't think there's a standard, no.
That's all the questions we have, Your Honor.
Staff?
No questions. Thank you.
Do you have your direct testimony in front of you from this case?
Mm-hmm.
So on page 3, question 10 was the impact to the PCA as a result of the forecasts, and then you compare to Potomac Edison's price to compare for a residential customer. You state that it's scheduled to increase to 0.10202 per kilowatt hour on June 1, 2025. What is it increasing from?
I believe it's either 99 point something, or it is already 101. It's not increasing much, but I don't have it memorized.
So Potomac Edison's price isn't increasing the way Williamsport's is.
That's correct. Yeah, because they have already been paying $90 this whole time when we've only been paying the 44.64, whatever the current PPA is, plus the 21.80. So we've only been paying $62 and change roughly for our energy for our power supply costs up until May 31st, 2025. So yeah, we've been considerably lower than them. This is going to catch us up to them, or at least closer. We're still going to be less, but we're closer.
And then question 11. It'll be an increase of $33.93 per month, which represents a 39.4% increase relative to their current monthly electric bill. So the increase of $33.93, are other portions of the bill going up as well? That's just the capacity? Or is that the total? No.
This is the PCA, so only the PCA is changing.
So when you say a 39.4% increase relative to their current monthly electric bill, you're comparing just the PCA, how it'll change the monthly bill?
No, I'm comparing the actual dollar increase to customers' total bill. So so their total bill right now is, I believe, $86 and change. So you can see that our total bill today is less than just the energy cost in Potomac Edison. But putting that aside, that's why it's high on a percentage basis, is because we have the lowest rates in the state by about 50%. And so even increasing our rates by 40%, we still have the lowest rates in the state. It's just, we're just victims of our own success, being able to keep our costs so low that our total bill is only $86. Or maybe
Total bill is only $86. It's going to go up by roughly $34.
That's right.
So to 120.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
That's
yeah.
That's the math I did right there. Yeah. So that's the 39.4% increase of the total bill. The 3% bandwidth you talked about, do you know where that is in the record, if anywhere?
It's in Williamsport's PCA ordinance, so it's in their ordinance that's on file with the Maryland Public Service Commission.
Do you have that with you?
Your Honor, I do have it pulled up if you'd like to see
Okay.
it.
I'd like to see it, and I'd like to put it in the record in this case.
Yeah, I know I responded with a clip of it in one of the data requests. So,
Can you explain how the 3% bandwidth works?
yes, if the forecast of power supply cost collection at the end of the future PCA period is above or below 3% of total power supply costs, then you would relevelize the PCA. So we set a forward-looking 12-month PCA, and then as each month progresses, we replace the forecasted cost with actual cost. And then if the actual costs go up by more than effectively 3% that we were forecasting over that time period, or go down by more than 3% over that forecasted time period, then we would relevelize the PCA up or down, depending on what it is.
Which requires you to file something with the commission?
Right. Right. That's correct. This hearing.
That's not why you filed in March, though.
That is because we knew
It was forecasted to go up, but it hadn't already gone up.
That's right. It was forecasted to have gone up. That's correct. That's why. Mm-hmm.
Because you talked with Mr. Baskin about sort of a difference between when you're collecting it and when you were, and that's because by the time you come in here and get permission to raise it, you
That's
wouldn't
correct.
be collecting.
Yeah, ideally we would be able to change it quickly, but
In your exhibit CSS-1, can you explain at the bottom, the left box, it says less base amount in rates.
Mhm.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hagerstown and Thurmont have moved that collection over. Basically, it is treated as if it were PCA revenues, meaning it is in the base rate, so they have per kilowatt hour rates. The first 0.02180 is what's being collected in base rate specifically for power supply cost. So if we were to remove that out and put it in the PPA, then the PPA would be that value shown on line 34. It would be the, oh, my eyesight's terrible, even though I printed it out that size. The 9699, I think it says.
It does.
Okay, so that's what the PCA would be if 100% of power supply costs were being collected in the PCA, but it's not. That's just a remnant of how it was done in the past, and like I said, I know that other utilities have moved that out so that it can be comparable to the cost to compare that you see with the other utilities.
Is it a matter of an assumption that 0.02180 would never get that low, so you might as well have that amount in rates and then only...
No, like I said, it was, yes, the PCA was meant to be a very small figure on the bill to sort of act kind of like an ACA does for the investor-owned utilities, like it's only to make up the small differences that's needed. But you're right, I mean, that 2180 has been the same for, I mean, even before I came on board, so it's never, it's baked into their tariff rates, and that's, yeah, it's just some numbers set who knows how many years ago.
And when you were talking to Mr. Baskin, there were various documents that you seemed to indicate you thought have already been produced in discovery. But for example, the RFP and the responses to the RFP.
That would have been to the last year's. It wouldn't have been to this one, but it would have been under R, yeah, the 9507R.
Yeah, back to your supplemental direct in R.
Mhm.
On page 1, you said Williamsport released an RFP in May 2023. Is that document in the record anywhere?
I mean, in that previous
You
case,
think it's
not
in there?
not this one. No, I didn't resubmit those this year.
Okay, I don't know that it's. You may have.
Whether it was just a response to a data request, it might have only been a response to data request.
Yes, I don't think it made its way into
It
the
might
record.
have.
And similarly, the results that you received and how they only included energy prices. You have documents to support everything you were talking to Mr. Baskin about?
Yeah, I mean, the term sheet of the RFP itself, it states that it is, you're either buying blocks or a load following energy product. So,
Okay.
yeah, and it had the matrix of I believe GDS was the associates that had put out that RFP, and they provided, a matrix of, once they reviewed all the rates, all the responses.
So what I'd like is, because I don't know that I've seen that, and maybe it was provided to staff,
Mhm.
as a bench data request, if you could produce the RFP and the term sheet and the
Mhm.
matrix that he's talking about to support his responses to Mr. Baskin's questions, then we'd have it in the record, and I think that would complete that.
Mhm.
And wherever we have that 3% bandwidth,
Mhm.
I'd like
Your Honor,
that.
I can send that around.
You'll submit that, and then we'll put that in the record.
If I may, Your Honor, you're asking for the RFP and the matrix of responses? You don't
Yes.
want
Mhm.
all the responses from?
No.
Okay.
We didn't even receive them from GDS.
The other is I guess, more of a timing, and since we're talking about what you filed in early March now, and you've already wanted to update it, do you think coming back in 6 months is appropriate, given the,
I mean, technically, we would be outside of the 3% bandwidth, in my opinion, by the end of this month. So that's why I was requesting an additional 2% increase.
I mean, if with the rates you requested in early March, you'd already be, if those were put into effect, you'd already be outside the 3%.
That's right, and it's not for, we're not suggesting to change any of the future forward pricing, like what we forecast the future cost to be in each month is the same. The only thing we changed is effectively the ACA portion of the PCA, which would be for actual cost in February, March, and then what we expect in April, because we have the first 2 weeks of April as well. So it's only affecting the ACA portion of the PCA total. Now, there was a very, very small change to the PPA because when I update the number of kilowatt hours in terms of retail sales and wholesale cost, I translated those to the future year as well. So instead of February and March of 2026 would be based on February and March of 25, as opposed to this one, which is February and March of 24, in terms of the total retail sales and wholesale purchases.
So you're telling me you want to come back next month?
No, I mean, what
Or
it
you
would
need
be
to come back.
best for the customers in terms of providing the most stable rate for them would be to approve the rate that I filed yesterday. I understand it was yesterday, but, you know,
How is a larger increase better for the customers?
because if we do not adjust, if we apply this PCA that was calculated on March 6th, then the under collection of power supply cost for February, March, but in particular April, is 3% of power supply cost. So we have effectively, if we do not increase the rate for that 3%, we would be outside, we'd be in violation of our PCA ordinance effectively by the end of this month because of what I anticipate the power supply cost being in April based on the last 2 weeks.
But that doesn't answer how it harms customers.
Because we would have to come back here again in, like you said, I would have to make another filing basically immediately, and then we would have another hearing, and that costs them money to have me do that and come here.
Well, there's not really a way around that since
Yes, there is.
Well,
You can.
we
if
can't
you-
look at what you filed last night.
And that's certainly, that's fine. I mean, it's the forward-looking futures prediction of energy prices is where there is room to have that number be whatever it needs to be. You know, yes, I used futures prices based on off-peak prices from that CNET or whatever, some CME, I believe it is the group that published that. But I'm not certainly not perfect or able to accurately predict 100% what the energy prices are going to be going forward, but we do know what they were in February and March, and now have a good idea of what they will be in April. And so that making that adjustment today gives them a better chance, as long as energy prices stay where they're at, to not go outside of that 3% bandwidth.
Isn't there a chance that capacity prices won't be as high as you've predicted?
So the capacity costs for June 1st of this year through May 31st of 25 are fixed. They're set in stone. So there is no, and their measurement period for that was our contribution to the 5CP last year. So that those numbers are set in stone.
You're saying all the actions that are being taken and what PGM is doing can't possibly change the capacity?
That's
price?
correct. Yes, because that auction's already cleared. The auction I was referring to is the one that's for capacity that would start June 1st of 26.
But aren't
to
they
go
going to
through-
have a capacity auction in a few months?
It's in July. That's correct. Mhm.
And you can't do anything based on that auction to
So
change
the
the
thing
capacity
is,
price?
this PCA forecast ends on May of 2026. So regardless of what that clears at, it's outside of this 12-month forecasted PCA. So it has no influence on this calculation.
Okay, the forecast is one thing, but what about actual?
That's what I'm saying. The actual cost will not start until June 1st of '26, whatever the result of this next auction is. So regardless of what it clears at, this time next year, hopefully, when we do another PCA relevelization, then I will know what it would be. Then the next PCA that's calculated would factor in that new capacity cost. But it's outside of this period, so it has no influence on this PCA calculation.
Okay, I'm happy to have the next hearing virtual to make it less of an expense on the company, but I can't do anything with something that was filed last evening. I can't ask staff to give me an opinion on that. So I suggest we schedule something in a month if that's what we need to do. And then we'll consider what was filed 4:30 yesterday, or I don't know if yours would update it again before we had another hearing.
So, Your Honor, would it be possible to continue this hearing for a week and give staff a chance to review what was filed yesterday?
Thank you, Your Honor. We'll need more time than that. Our witness is just coincidentally out of town next week, so we're talking about basically her looking at this tomorrow to the extent she has time, and then beginning the week of April 28th, going through everything.
Okay, but 2 weeks then, Your Honor.
May 1st? Can staff do May 1st?
No, I wouldn't be able to do May 1st.
Yes, Your Honor, by May 1st. And that would be, including, which they've been doing, really quick responses to the DRs. And council has been processing them very quickly when we appreciate that.
Do you need to look at your calendar?
We have all day available on the QLJ calendar on May 1st. So I can do whatever time works for everyone. Mr. Baskin?
Any time would work for a PC, Your Honor.
Could my witness check his calendar?
Yes, you don't have it. Oh, yeah.
No.
That's fine.
Your Honor, excuse me, could staff be heard?
Yes.
Just conferring with the witness. She's doesn't think that she could have her review finalized and direct testimony filed until Monday, May 5th. She's trying to give an accurate estimate. So I'm sorry, May 1 was premature. I misspoke.
Tuesday, May 6th?
Staff is available, yes.
OPC would be available May 6th.
May 6th is fine, Your Honor.
Okay, and to be clear, on May 6th, we would be talking about what Mr. Sims filed last night.
Correct, Your Honor.
No additions to it.
Correct, Your Honor.
And is it also true that you do not want an order in the meantime? We're going to continue this, and that will be, you expect an order after that date. You don't want an interim order on anything.
Well,
We're continuing the hearing, that's what you end up with.
I understand.
I mean, as long as we can shorten the appeal period so that we can get it in place in June.
I think, Your Honor, the issue is that we know that the capacity prices are going up on June 1st, and we know Your Honor takes time to issue the order, and we have to prepare new bills. We're concerned that we're going to be in a time crunch and unable to generate the bills in time to be able to collect the money.
If I get a proposed order out by the end of that week, May 9th, with a shortened appeal period of 7 days,
That would be much appreciated, Your Honor.
Does that give you enough time, though?
Yes.
That's May 16th, final order, possibly.
Yes,
That's good?
yes.
Okay. Is that fine with everyone? Everyone, I know there's some confusion there, but it looks like we're doing 10 a.m. on Tuesday, May 6th for a continuation of this hearing. And then you guys all agree to a shortened appeal period of 7 days from the proposed order.
Your Honor, I don't think we have an issue with a shortened appeal period. However, in last week's hearing, you mentioned the possibility of providing notice to Williamsport's customers
Yes.
ahead of the price increase so that it would hopefully mitigate the price shock to an extent and allow customers the ability to plan. And given the new timing, that might be a very tight turnaround. And so we would ask if it might be possible to get some sort of an
Can
interim.
you and Williamsport work on the format of the notice and the language of the notice with everything but the final? Well, I guess even you can go ahead and put in the price based on what he's filed, subject to change,
Okay.
and work on that in the next 3 weeks, and then have
That would work
it
for
ready
us,
to
Your Honor.
go. Does that sound? How would you issue a notice to your customers to advise them of the rate increase?
I mean, they've had mayor and council meetings is where they've discussed this. Chad, what have you done outside of the mayor and council meetings?
The change is going into effect June 1? I'm just trying to make sure you have enough time. Does that give you enough time if the order's final on the 16th to get notice out?
Yeah.
Okay, because the notice will be all ready to go,
Right.
just awaiting final order. And then, because that's just 2 weeks.
Right.
Okay, does that work?
That would work for us, Your Honor. We would also be open to if the notice included an estimate of the new price and was able to go out before the order, recognizing that the new price would not yet be finalized. I think OPC would also be open to that.
Well, let me say, it's going to be an estimate anyway, right? You don't know
Mhm.
exactly how much bills are going to go up. So you can draft a notice with an estimated price increase, and maybe that gives you a little more time, right?
I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing here. We're talking about a notice to the customers in the bills that say we're
That
expecting.
explains that the capacity
Yeah.
prices have increased dramatically, and so there's going to be an increase in their bills. Explaining it is what I am envisioning. You don't, and you have, you'll have an approximation.
I think I understand what you're saying. I'm not 100% sure that's what OPC is saying.
That is what OPC is saying. OPC is saying that given the new rate that Williamsport will be able to charge won't be finalized until Judge Lawrence issues her order, we would be open to having this the explanation assume that Judge Lawrence would issue a rate in line with what Williamsport expects, to allow for more time, while noting that that rate is not yet final.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you. Given all this discussion, I don't think we need to have Ms. Shea come on the stand.
Thank you.
Okay, what about your other witness? Will he be updating his testimony?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there anything else then we need to do today?
Enough for staff. Thank you.
Okay, and just to confirm, the hearing on the 6th will be virtual.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You can go off the record. We're adjourned. Or we're